What is the scariest thing, paranormal, that has ever happened to you? Number 1. I don't use Reddit and I don't plan to use Reddit. The only post this account will have is going to be this one. I have absolutely no motive to lie, and the following is a 100% accurate account of events that I had when I was a child. It's very hard for me to live with these experiences as I want answers to what I've seen. I have only told my very close family about this, as I have memories of being laughed at in school when I bought it from, including from teachers. I'm a completely normal dude, 17 now and in high school. When I very young, 5-6, I started complaining of a feeling of being watched when I was in a room by myself. I understand that some people will automatically think that I have schizophrenia, and I understand that thought, but bear with me here. This feeling of being watched would result in my refusing to sleep alone, so I slept in my parents' bed until a pretty old age, 8-9. My father did not always tolerate this, of course, so I would be forced to sleep in my own bed sometimes. When I did sleep alone, I would always, and I say always, wake up in the middle of the night. My first experience came around that same age, 8-9. I was sleeping alone and woke up in the middle of the night. I always placed a large body pillow next to me so I would feel less watched, and when I pulled it away I saw a female apparition standing maybe 2-3 meters away from my bed. I still remember the face on that woman and her clothes. Curly hair, 75-85 years old, very wrinkly face, buttons on her shirt and stripes. I screamed as loud as I could and ran out into the kitchen where my dad picked me up and placed me into their bed. It did not stop there, but it just accelerated faster and faster. Whenever I woke up in the middle of the night, I would see an apparition standing in my doorway. It was shaped like a human and it looked like a cloud. It was not stationary, as it was moving slightly like smoke would. It would stand there for 15-60 seconds before slowly disappearing into the ceiling. I remember being able to talk slightly, so I'm sure it was not sleep paralysis, words like "Hi, who are you?" but I never got a reply. I would see this thing more or less every single night for a year, and I was equally terrified every time. One time I woke up to a female voice saying hi. I thought it was my mother, so I remember vividly saying in a bit as, thought she woke me up for school. Something made me open my eyes though, and the apparition was standing in that same spot and then disappearing exactly in the same way. My parents did not believe my stories at first, as I would tell them about it every single morning, but they started believing me more and more as time went on. My brothers also reported some strange stuff. One of them heard a female voice saying goodnight when he was about to sleep. The other one has told me that he would hear very loud footsteps outside the bathroom at night. He'd check but see nothing. In fact, it was so loud that he could feel the vibration in the floor. What's interesting is that just outside of the toilet, restroom is my doorway. The doorway where I would see this entity every night. I would cry myself to sleep every night because I was so scared. One time I was staying home from school, I think I was sick. My mother was gone to the store to buy something, and I was in my brother's room playing video games. At one point, a sculpture fell down into my face from above his PC. I got unsettled and left the room right away. Across the hallway, I saw the apparition. This time it was moving. It was moving fast, on its way into the kitchen. Our house is shaped very weird, you can basically see the entire house from every angle. What I have noted is that so much of this activity seems to have happened in my doorway. One time me, my brother and my father were watching a movie in the living room when my brother stopped something walked around in the garden. It was pretty dark but we could make out this figure. It looked exactly like what I saw in the room every night. It was shaped like a person walking around, back and forth in the garden, but it looked like a black cloud as opposed to the white cloud I have always seen. My father, however, could not see a single thing. He could not see what we could see. Number 2. I have a friend who is into spiritual stuff, meditates a lot, makes small cleaning rituals, etc. I'm more like a skeptic person, always trying to find a logical reason for weird stuff. This all changed though, when I visited my friend last year November. We wanted to go for a walk in the evening like we often do, and I sensed that something was off with him. When I asked him, he told me that there's something in his apartment, something weird. Short story short, I wanted to go and take a look. So we went to his apartment, and as soon as we were in there, it did not really feel that welcoming as it normally did. His cat came sprinting to him as soon as we entered. She acted a bit stressed. He told me that he saw someone standing in his living room at night when he went to go to the toilet, but whenever he looked and turned on all lights, there would be nothing there. I felt really uneasy while he told me this, and I always looked around. It felt like someone was watching me. After a while I asked him if we could leave. He agreed, and I walked to his apartment door. He then went into his bedroom, which is on the other side of the living room and door to the apartment, because he was looking for his cat to maybe come with us. I told him that I will be waiting outside, and as I said that, I left the apartment, door wide open, and as soon as I was out in the hall, the door suddenly slammed shut with a loud bang. My friend came rushing out, pale as flour, and his cat didn't even hesitate to just jump down the stairs and sprint to the main door of the house. I just stood there, shocked. My friend leaned against the wall, saying nothing at all. He stayed the night at his mother's house with his cat. Of course we talked about this later. I tried to find a logical way to explain what had happened. But there was no window open in his apartment, and the door to the main hall of the house was closed too. The door is a massive old wood door which is a little bit hard to open and to close. Number 3. I genuinely don't even know where to start here. I had so many experiences at this location than any other I've ever been to, never mind lived in. Some background details may help. My parents split up when I was a kid, around 6 or 7. My dad passed when I was 18. My mom and I did a lot of moving around. We've probably lived in at least 4 houses and 3 apartments. Don't get me wrong, I've had experiences at almost all of these places, but nothing has ever been quite as strong, or strange, as the little blue old orchard house. Things from this house have definitely followed us. You can choose to believe me or you can choose not to, that's up to you, but this is the true story of my experiences. I've always been super intuitive and extremely open to the spirit world, but I've also always been extremely careful. It started when I was a kid. I would mainly say things that made my parents and others say or think I was just about to say that. It was extremely frequent, to the point my dad used to actually be quite creeped out by it. As I got older, I've just gotten more and more open and have now had many encounters. I believe I began to open up the most at the old orchard house, which is probably why I remember so many of my experiences. My mom is also extremely open and intuitive. My very first experience ever was the first time I was home alone. We moved in, got settled, made the place cozy, and my mom went back to work on the Monday. For some reason I can't remember, I was home alone for a couple of hours on this day. This didn't bother me at all. I was 10, maybe 11, but I've always been mature for my age, so my parents had no issue with leaving me alone for a couple of hours, but nothing too long. Since this is already so long, we'll just get to it. Our staircase had a square hole cut out of the wall about halfway up for some reason. Apparently they were used to be able to call whoever was in the kitchen, but it also worked perfectly for putting photos on top of the pantry it happened to be aligned with. On this day I was sat at the couch watching TV with our old dog, Sam. All of the sudden a picture frame flew off of this pantry. When I say flew, I mean flew off of the pantry, halfway across the kitchen. Sam got up and growled directly at the kitchen, cackles up and everything. I wasn't scared or bothered in the slightest bit for some reason. I decided to go pick up the picture frame, and although I wasn't scared, it felt like something wanted me out, so I decided to take Sam outside and wait for my mom to get home. When she got up to the front deck I told her what happened, and she went to examine the picture frame and noticed it absolutely did not get thrown in the slightest. This pantry was about 6.5 or 7 feet high, as well as this being a delicate frame, but there was zero visible damage. Number 4. I have been wanting to share this story to Reddit for a long time, and I am just getting the chance to sit down and put this experience into words. I am unsure if anyone will see this, but if you do and have any possible idea or theory as to what I saw, please let me know. I also want to add that I am not the best writer, but I am going to try my best to paint a clear picture of what I saw. This experience is 100% true and is the most frightening event to ever happen to me. Mostly because they've yet to think of a realistic explanation. I live in upstate New York and my family owns around 10 acres of land surrounded by field and woods. I have always had experiences growing up in this house. Maybe more stories to come, but anyway. It was late at night, close to 1 to 2 a.m. when this occurred. I have a window at the end of my bed that has an AC in. It's about 8 feet from my window to the grass below. My cat, Hudson, loves to jump up on open windows and lay across and press against the screen. This night, he had decided to jump up on that open window. Thad totally forgot the screen to my window was out due to the AC. I didn't realize this until heard Hudson hissing and screeching at something outside the window. I assumed it was some sort of animal, maybe a raccoon, and tried to call him in. Suddenly, he had fallen out the window and started screeching. They've never heard him make a sound like this before and jump out of bed to go outside and get him. I went to my little brother's room to have him help me go find my cat. I was really nervous because he's gotten out before and has been missing for days on end, so my fear of the dark was thrown out the window in this moment. I had my flashlight on and sprinted out the door and went to the side of the house where my window was. I made the turn and shined my flashlight on the area. What I saw was not my cat but a 7 to 8 feet figure trying to scale the walls of my house and reach into my open window. One of the creature's back legs were pressed against the house while the front legs had a hold of my windowsill. The creature noticed my flashlight and looked in my direction. It had deep red eyes that kept me frozen in my spot. The creature stared me straight in the eyes and proceeded to let go of the house and move towards the field on the side. But it didn't go on all fours. Whatever this thing was stood on its back legs and ran quickly into the field. In the darkness, I was able to make out what looked like a set of horns or antlers on this thing's head. Its height on its back legs was at least 7 to 8 feet tall and did not look at all like a human. Its posture was slightly hunched over, and its arms swayed to the side of it as it moved. They hung close to the level of what I guess would be its knees. My little brother was in the front of the house looking for my cat, so I went to grab him and help me look in the field the creature ran into. At this point, I think my adrenaline was going so fast didn't completely process what I had seen. We got close to the field and saw absolutely nothing, no cat or creature. We made our way back to the front to look for my cat on the other side of the house. Without saying anything, my brother and Frau's, we both looked towards the trees and bushes at the side of the house and saw them rustling. We heard this painfully loud shrieking, and we booked it to the front door. They've no idea if what we heard was that creature or some other animal, but I had an awful gut feeling standing in that driveway. It wasn't safe and I couldn't have my brother out there. I locked the door quickly and went to the back porch sliding door and saw my cat waiting at the door to be let in. He is the type to escape and be out for days with no issue. He has never once just come to the back door after getting out. He looked scared. His tail was the bushiest I have ever seen, and the poor thing was shaking. He ran inside and stayed away from the windows and doors the rest of the night. Have only told this story in this much detail to my boyfriend, and even then, it is so difficult to explain what I had seen, heard, and felt that night. The gut feeling that something is not right, and we could be in serious danger was nothing I have felt before until that night. The most memorable part of that experience was the feeling I got when the creature stared into my soul with those ugly, deep red eyes. I have nightmares about this event, and I see its eyes often when I close mine. It took me so long to process and analyze what I had seen, but the closest I can describe this creature and its stature is if you search up Wendigo depictions. I am not completely sure if it was a Wendigo, but I do live fairly close to so-called Wendigo territory in New York. The whole experience freaks me out thinking about it and thought I'd finally share. Number 5. I always tell the story of how got into ghost hunting. Years ago, I was dating a girl at the beginning of the ghost hunters craze. About 2005-ish. She got really into it and I thought it was bonkers dumb, but I loved her, so who cares. She tells me her family owns a large plot of land with a haunted house and if I'd like to record it overnight to see if we pick up anything. The location's Schulenburg, Texas, is located halfway between Houston and San Antonio. The girlfriend's family owned a huge tract of land there, acres upon acres. We arrived that morning to get an early start and explore the land so I could get familiar with it. The entirety of the land was fenced, as rural Texas owners are wont to do, across the entirety of its boundaries. Entry was far off the main road, down a long stretch of dirt and gravel path through trees and bushes. Once through the gate, you emerged at the wood house. The wood house was the newest of the homes built on the property and served as the main house for family and a sometimes guest house. It had a TV but no cable, plus 2 stories. With an open layout and large, welcome windows, it had all the accoutrements of a modern home minus cell phone signal or cable. This would be my home and home base for the next 2 nights. Outside, I was introduced to the golf cart, which was necessary to navigate the huge swaths of land that would otherwise take an hour or more to traverse on foot. After lunch, her mother stayed behind while we loaded up and departed for the brick house. The brick house was another modern structure built on the opposite point of land, with an outside wooden deck that looked out onto descending hills and provided an amazing view of the countryside. With a jacuzzi built on the deck and a TV inside, we enjoyed some time making sure the jacuzzi was operating and clean, just in case we wanted to use it. Then we loaded up into the golf cart for our final destination, the stone house. During the years after the Civil War, my girlfriend told me, local legend was that a bugle player had shot himself through the mouth after coming down with some sort of cancer or tumor. There were records of this, she claimed, although I never saw them. Still, I took it on good faith. The structure itself was half modern, half Civil War period. The modern side was wood and electrically powered but connected to the original Civil War structure. You could tell the difference immediately stepping into the Civil War side. The floor was built of large hewn stone that looked ripped from a rock quarry. The wooden door was made of ancient wood and felt like it took incredible effort to push open. The Civil War side was essentially one continuous room with a doorway connecting the living room to the bedroom. The bedroom was like a prison cell. Stepping inside, there was a tiny bed to your left and a dresser to your right. You could turn left and right but not move, only lie down on the bed. Visitors who had slept overnight at the house told stories about it, stories about knocks on the door in the middle of the night and scratching on the floors. The day, in late afternoon, I set up on a tripod a mini DV video camera with tapes that needed to be replaced after 4 hours of continuous video. We set it up in the living room facing the bedroom. The camera stared directly out the back window of the bedroom, a small, pathetic thing that provided only a meager view of the outside. Heavy curtain had been set on a recently installed rod to separate the 2 rooms, so I made sure to pull the curtain open. It was heavy, with the thickness of a rug or extremely sturdy blanket, then left with my girlfriend and her sister. Before we left, we looked into the camera and made mocking gestures as I proclaimed we're the Ghostbusters. An easy joke, a silly one to end a silly project as we turned the camera on and left for the evening. As we were driving away, I suddenly got an anxious feeling that we hadn't turned the camera on. We quickly zipped back to make sure, made one last silly pose and proclamation of being Ghostbusters, then returned to the wood house before the sun could go down. Daylight was coming to an end. I remember, as we sat around the living room of the wood house, my girlfriend's mother telling us that we had left the light on in the stone house. Of course we hadn't. We'd never needed to turn it on in the first place. It had been daylight hours. But, as we gathered around the window overlooking the land below, I realized that, indeed, the light was on. And so, we clambered into the golf cart and zipped back to the stone house. Sure enough, the light was on. Strange, I thought, but there had been 3 of us. Any one of us could have turned the light on. But, with it turned off, the house fell into pitch blackness. If you've never left the big city behind or traveled into the country without any nearby town, there's a deep darkness that settles on the land. It was made worse as we stood in that house, that small, claustrophobic house. For the first time since we had arrived, I realized why people might see or hear things while sleeping there. The house was small, like a tomb, and standing in the living room in absolute darkness was terrifying. I quickly ushered everyone out and we zoomed back to the wooden house. Joy returned as we sat around, telling stories and playing games while we enjoyed dinner. I remembered why I didn't believe in ghosts, and enjoyed the rest of the night with people I cared for. The video review: we returned to the house periodically throughout the night to switch out tapes but gave up sometime after 2 in the morning. I didn't really think we would catch anything, after all, and the girlfriend was sleepy. We collected the tapes and spent the next day relaxing on the land before returning to my home at the end of the weekend. The evening of our return, the girlfriend opted to make margaritas while I watched the tapes. It was one of those apartments you get in college, small but not too small, with a living room connected directly to the kitchen. She could see me as I sat on the couch and reviewed the tapes. Well, fast-forwarded through the tapes. I knew I wouldn't find anything. I've done a lot of ghost hunting over the years since then, and when you do see stuff or catch things, it's never what people want. It's never a full body of a dead man or some ghastly apparition appearing. And, even on that first day I ever spent reviewing, I didn't catch anything like that either. But I do remember fast-forwarding, while the tape was still playing, just to get through nothing happening as fast as possible. And I do remember the moment I paused the video, wondering what was going in with the camera. Some of you may have never used a video tape camera before, if you're over a certain age. When you fast-forward while it's playing, you see static lines. The image jumps a little. But the image was jumping not just a little, but a lot. So I paused it and rewound the tape. On video, you could see us all on tape, me shouting about how we're Ghostbusters, and then the sound of the door closing as we left. Then, outside, the sound of our golf cart as it roared to life, and then the fading noise of us leaving. But what I'll never forget is the music. The single, solemn, mid-tone that started to play. Not quite whistling, not quite a wind instrument. Then the low tone, deeper and bass-filled. Then the high-pitched tone that started to ring out as the camera started to wobble and jump. I didn't know what I was watching. I called for the girlfriend, who put the margarita mix away and came into the room to see why I was sounding scared. I rewound the tape and we both watched and heard the same music and shaking of the camera. Do you remember me saying that we returned because, thought I had forgotten to turn the camera on? In the far background, I hear the noise of our golf cart returning and, as we pulled up, the sounds and motion of the camera all coming to a stop. I watched as we came back inside, I checked the film, we did another silly pose, and then roared away again. And, again, a few minutes after you could no longer hear the golf cart. The music, again, starting with that low tone and progressing through highs and lows as the camera started to wobble up and down, the screen jumping until the image vanished for a second in a wash of static lines. When the image returned, the music had stopped. We reviewed photos we took that day. There are strange auras of light around us, but that could be merely light tricks. The music though. I will never forget the music. Number 6. Marshville, North Carolina, 2008. My then girlfriend lived in a very secluded and rural area and I lived about 45 minutes away. I drove county roads as much as I could to avoid highways, less traffic lights, stops, etc., and this was a daily drive for almost 2 years. I always took the same road and knew every inch of it by heart. It was mostly a straight stretch of road except one area where it banked right up a hill, and as soon as it crested it banked back downhill left. Very few houses along the way and a fair amount of tree groves, so it was quite dark. Never once had I encountered anything out of the ordinary, there was rarely even other vehicles traveling. The most signs of life I ever saw was an occasional deer in the distance. However, one late summer evening I was headed home around 2 a.m., cruising around 40 miles per hour down that same road. Got to the hill, made the first bank to the top, and as turned into down bank, I saw it. A humanoid shape, cloaked in shadows. No discerning features, and oddly my headlights barely illuminated it. This thing was just floating there, resembling how ink spreads through water. This was all I could make out before I realized I wouldn't be able to stop in time to avoid it. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, clenched my jaw and squinted my eyes as I had no idea what I was about to mow down. At the moment my bumper would have collided with solid matter, the black mass dissipated away. Yet I felt an ice-cold rush through the center of my car. My dash lights failed but the throttle jerked in sudden burst of acceleration. I didn't bother even glancing in the rearview mirror. I was frozen in disbelief of what had encountered. The dash lights flickered back on and vertical bar took the first available turn to bright lights of the highway. I sped into gas station parking lot and pulled up under the pump overhang, basking in the warm fluorescent glow and trying to slow my heart rate. I immediately called my girlfriend to tell her what had happened, but didn't get an answer. I was relieved at first, thinking maybe my imagination had pulled one over on me and I didn't see anything at all. Saved me from sounding like a raving lunatic to her. So I went into the station to buy some smokes, convincing myself the dark really does play tricks, and wrote off the mishaps with my car as it was aged and flawed. But as vertical bar made my way back outside, my fears began to rekindle. From a distance I noticed something on the front bumper, and as got closer I realized it was on the hood as well. It looked like frost. A wide strip of white frost across the center of hood, grille and bumper. It was 78 degrees Fahrenheit outside. There's no way that could be. Against my better judgment I reached out to touch it. It was definitely cold, but more odd was that it was slimy. It melted into a goo substance as I felt it and stuck to my fingertips as I pulled my hand away. I just stood there for a few minutes and watched as it melted, congealed, then slowly dripped down and off the car. Have no idea what any of it was, and for a long time told myself it didn't happen. Kept it to myself and made up weird excuses to my girl and friends why I wouldn't drive that road anymore after midnight. A few years went by until one night I was drinking with a close friend and decided to spill the whole story. He explained to me that him and his family had lived in the area for years, and while what I experienced was shocking, it didn't surprise him in the least. He told me his parents and grandparents had shared similar stories, and they always just said Ole Scratch was out tonight. Number 7. I actually have a few paranormal things I can talk about, not all scary though. My mom is usually away from home quite often, and when I was younger, 10-15 years old, she would make me stay over my grand's house. My grand's house is extremely old, 300 years old in fact, and the interior is very old-fashioned. Entering it always gave me a sinister feel. It wasn't just me being scared of the dark or anything, because I'd still have this fear even during the day. The house is quite large, well, huge in my opinion, and with quite a lot of land. My gran has had her heating system redone many times as the house for some reason never ever heats up. She eventually gave up and uses a gas fire thing. There is no Wi-Fi in the house, only in the kitchen, which my granddad built as an extension when they moved there. The kitchen is the only place in the house that feels safe. The rest of the house walls are too thick for Wi-Fi to reach, which is why it's only in the kitchen, I think anyway, but this means I don't have access to the internet and my phone is pretty much useless in the rest of the house because there's also no reception. Anyway, I'd stay there usually every weekend and sometimes during the weekdays. I had my own large room too. I am an active sleeper, meaning I often sleep talk, but I very rarely sleepwalked, until I started sleeping there. I'd often find myself waking up downstairs in my grandfather's chair, or in the fancy sitting room in the back of the house at like 1 to 4 a.m. I had no recollection of going there, so obviously I sleepwalked, but I didn't even remember falling asleep. I always had a tough time sleeping in my grand's, as it'd just have a flight or fight instinct constantly stopping me from sleeping, but then it'd wake up in a different room with no memory of when I slept or anything. Scary thing is, there are no street lamps nearby, so the house would be pitch black and it would be so cold that my phone would die from the cold, so it'd usually have no light source and it'd wander back upstairs stumbling in the dark. When trying to fall asleep, It always hears strange sounds, and it wasn't just me. My mom used to when she slept here, her friend, my aunt, my cousins, everyone heard these sounds and had weird experiences. The wallpaper would move as if animated, and it would be like someone was walking outside my door in the hallway, and then turning on the tap in the bathroom and creaking open the doors. My gran always had them shut at night, not sure why. Quite often though it'd stare at my door and suddenly it would be pushed open. Not enough for me to see the other side, but just the tiniest crack open. I stopped closing my door after a while cause I fucking hated it. Things escalated however. I'd get so scared, I'd close my eyes and pretend I was dead or asleep. I couldn't even breathe due to the fear of being noticed by whatever was walking around. But whatever it was, it started coming in my room, as if it was getting braver to approach me, or maybe toying with me. Anyway, I'd have my eyes tight shut and it'd be as still as a corpse, and suddenly I'd feel extreme pressure, weight on my upper legs, as if a full-grown human had sat on them. This happened quite often, and the freaky thing is, my mom told me she also experienced this when young. It would also feel like something was breathing on my face and touching my hand. It was extremely creepy, not just in a paranormal sense, but as a young girl it felt really weird and uncomfortable, as if this thing had very wrong intentions, if you know what I mean. Anyway, this went on for ages. It would either lay on me or just sit on me, and I'd still be sleepwalking and waking up in those two rooms. One night however I was done. I didn't want to deal with this crap anymore, and my boyfriend had suggested to me that there might actually be someone living in the walls, and I wanted to get cops involved or literally anyone to help, as I was genuinely terrified. So I started being at the ready with my camera. I had a battery pack for my phone and did just have it on charge constantly, as my phone battery would jump from 70% to 20% to 50% to 5% constantly in that house due to the cold. I think this made the thing mad, as it started being more active and more loud. At one point it even pushed my wardrobe, which wobbled a lot, and it was terrifying. I started seeing weird shadows on the ceiling, as if something was moving on it at high speeds, and it'd constantly be taking pictures everywhere, but with no luck, until one day that is. I took a picture of my ceiling, and in the corner of the picture, there was a weird white thing, like a foot or limb or something. It had no details like toes or nails that I could see. It was just a pale white and slightly blurred, as if it was moving at high speed to avoid the camera. I showed my mom. My boyfriend. I showed quite a few people. My mom started to let me sleep alone at home because of this, and my boyfriend was scared shitless. I only stayed a few nights there after that, and barely anything happened in them, only the noises from the corridor and bathroom, but no interactions with me or my room. Then that was it, never slept there again. About a year after that my grandfather passed away in the house. The fancy sitting room at the back of the house was turned into a room for him, as we didn't want him spending his last days in hospital. He had motor neuron disease. Something to note about him, he was very strict with how many lights we had on in that house. To get angered if too many lights were on, as he was crazy about saving energy and money. Anyway, when he passed away, we had nearly all the lights on in the house as the whole family was there, but when he passed, all the lights turned off. It was only my grand's house that had this power cut too. The nurses and doctors were so stunned that they left instantly and left the body in the house. After his passing, the sinister feeling I had in the house had gone. Well, not entirely, but it was dulled down. I haven't slept there since, so I don't know if the sounds still happen. My gran is usually fast asleep and has medication that helps her sleep deeply, so she wouldn't know either, but yeah, that's my experience. I've experienced a few odd paranormal things in my life, but my gran's house was by far the most terrifying and extreme. I'm not religious at all, but honestly what I experienced in my gran's made me pray to God out of fear. But yeah, I wanted to share this. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.